Interesting that you said that I'm not a stranger to this audience. Does anyone remember the last time I was here? Really? I cursed on stage, so it took a while for Alan to invite me back. And this time my main message will be that certification is good, but only when you think of what you're actually doing. So I'm a little bit the odd one out in this audience, so it will probably be the last time Alan invites me over. It's also the reason why I wanted to start with the Irish flag. It was also in my previous presentation. Does anyone know how your own flag was actually made? Okay. A long time ago, how much time do I have? A long time ago, our king, William III, the King of Orange, married the Queen of England, and we got the United Kingdom of England, Ireland, and Scotland. That was a long time ago, but King William was a Protestant. You know the story about religions, right? I don't want to go in there. And after a while, when Ireland got independent, you got this flag, and the green represents the traditional Celtic people, and the orange represents the followers of the King of Orange, so the national king of the Netherlands. And the white in between, any guess? Peace in the middle. So to make it easy on you, the rest of my presentations, the slides with the green background are kind of the Irish way of doing things. The orange slides are the Dutch way of doing things, and the slides with the white background are trying to keep the peace in the middle. So just a warning up front on this one. So certification and BIM standards, BIM processes. I always want to make a clear distinction between the process and the actual end result. So usually in the construction industry, we have a process, we do a lot of things. Some people in the lean field actually think that most of these processes are waste, because when we could build a building in one take, you don't need all this preparation and engineering processes. That's very interesting. But we have a process up front, and then we have an end result. So that's always a clear distinction that I want to make. And on the standards, that distinction kind of fades out in some instances. But you really see that we have a lot of these process-oriented standards. So most of the standards we talk about these days that come from the Brits originate from this PAS 1192, which is now the 19650 standards, codes of practice. There's a lot of focus on these standards recently, and I think most of the presentations today will be about certification against these standards. But there's also standards like IFC, like COBE, like this BIM base eyeglass, like a lot of the national government bodies that say you can do whatever you want as long as at the end of the process you deliver us this. And these are the requirements to the result that you have delivered to us. So this is really a distinction I want to make. And since most of the focus in Ireland, and it's the green background, is on these process standards, I just want to have a couple of questions for you, and I want to compare that with the way of working in the Netherlands. So does anyone recognize this phrase? Before uploading to a shared area, a model should be reviewed and checked according to compliance requirements in order to be fit for purpose. Anyone has good eyes looking at the reference or actually recognizes this? So this is from the PAS 1192. And this is the picture that actually comes with it. So for the people who didn't see this, so this is the part in the CDE, so the Common Data Environment part. So this is where it actually explains how you should be working with the Common Data Environment. On the left, the shared part, so the shared models, usually people call this the Common Data Environment. And on the right side, you've got an architectural working place and the construction engineer, the structural working package. So the process here is that in this example, structures uploads a coordinated model to shared. So in the shared space, there's the architectural model, construction model, MEP model, etc., etc. And in this use case, there's an update or there's a first version, and structure uploads that to shared. Then the following part in the process is that the architect actually downloads the structure model from the shared space, reviews it, has to check if the architect has to check if he agrees with all the changes and the upload that the structural engineer made. And when he does, he has to remove his own elements from his model because those elements are now the responsibility of the construction engineer. So to make it even more practical, there is a shared model with columns. The columns are designed by the architect. Structure uploads a new revision of the columns. The architect downloads those columns, reviews them, and when he agrees, he removes his own columns because now the columns of the construction engineer are actually the ones that have to be in the shared space. So this is your standards. Who actually works like this? Should I rephrase the question, or who thinks this is a good way of working? Okay, we're going to the slide with the orange background. We actually had this question and it was explained a little bit better and asked it to a lot of people in the Netherlands. Does this make your work more effective? And almost everyone said no. So the preferred way of working is that you actually combine a lot of data sets, do model checking with Solibri, and there's actually people saying that all the columns have to be in there twice, and they have to be exactly the same, because then we know that we actually coordinate it between each other. The architect doesn't want to remove their columns. The construction engineer wants to check if the columns are still the same as the architect, even after changes. So there's a different way of working in practice than that's actually being described in the standards. So that says something about standardizing a process against, we now have tools to do checking, we have the ability to actually facilitate different processes. So what are we going to do? What's the alternative? And what we see, and this is a little bit more philosophical maybe, is that we're always on a quest for a simple solution. When there's a standard, we couldn't do a certification against the standard. That probably means we're doing good, right? It's like the ISO 9001 that was already mentioned. When we all do ISO 9001, we all know something's doing good. And that's basically how human beings work. We always find a simple solution. But it's not always simple. The examples that we always have comparing the construction industry to the airplane industry, there's also things going wrong there. All these fancy pictures of we're losing data and that's not good, or we have these 3 levels and it only increases per level and it only gets better, or this even the picture where we tell each other that working productivity in the industry is really bad and we have to do something. When you actually dive into this and look at it, what it actually means, it's always nuanced. Actually, when you use BIM, there's still a data rub, but the actual level of information is much higher than original, so it doesn't matter if you have information loss because you're still at the preferred level. This level 3 of the wedge has actually 4 different levels that are also dealing with blockchain parts, and it starts to be really complex there. And when you look at worker productivity in recent years, the construction industry is actually outperforming every other industry out there. It doesn't mean that we're actually doing good. It means that the way the numbers are being handled is different and not really reflect what we think of worker productivity. It doesn't mean we're doing really good now, but it also doesn't mean we did really bad in the previous picture. So we're on a quest for a simple solution and a simple situation in an industry that's increasingly getting more complex. We're getting sensor technology, we're getting digital twins, and we're still trying to make a simple, standardized process to deal with all this upcoming complexity. So that's kind of my pitch up until now. So it's time for the commercial break. There's actually a reason why Alan invited me to speak on certification, because I also certify consultants. So I'm not against certification, I'm actually not against standards. As was mentioned, I'm responsible for a spin-off company called BIM Supporters. The idea here is that we have a couple of online assessment tools. I'll run you through it later on. And these tools do an assessment of your company, your project, yourself, and the data that you produce. And then when you want help, because something pops up in the assessment, or you want to continue development, or you have a roadmap that you want to set out, you can hire a consultant to help you with that. And we provide a list of certified consultants that we know are really good, that we know are actually know what they're talking about. They look a little bit deeper to what's actually going on. So the idea here is that we do a standardized assessment and then have a specific custom-made follow-up advice from a consultant that actually knows what he's talking about. So to run you through the tools, the BIM Quick Scan is a questionnaire of 45 questions. It asks you how you are dealing with BIM within your organization. It's kind of a measurement for BIM maturity within your organization. It could be a company, it could be anything. So the BIM execution plan generator doesn't actually generate a BIM execution plan. It's also a questionnaire of 15 questions sent out to different project partners. What's your preferred way of working? What kind of tools are you using? What's your ability to export data? What's your ability to import data? And then we can make a match between the project partners on how the collaboration will probably go when everyone uses their preferred way of working. I've got the next slide will tell you a little bit more about that. Then we got BIM Secrets, which is e-courses and quizzes. And we got BIM Analytics, where you upload an IFC model and you get an assessment on the data richness of that data set. So how many geometrical triangles per cubic meter, how many objects per cubic meter, how many properties per object. And in all these four tools, like I said, it's a standardized assessment. And that makes it possible to do a comparison. So when you fill out 45 questions in the quick scan, you get a level of this is your BIM maturity on different topics, on different chapters, and you can compare your level with others within your fields. Same goes for BIM Analytics. When you upload a model, maybe you say this is an architectural model of LOD 200, you can compare the geometrical richness and the semantic richness of the model with other LOD 200 architectural models. So it kind of gives you an insight on what am I actually doing, how am I comparing with others. So one slide on the BIM execution plan generator. So this is an example of a result. Like I said, so Lex van Zijn needs information from Remco de Haan. He uses Revit. But he's also having the capability of exporting and importing IFC 2x3. But Remco de Haan doesn't use Revit, so the proposed solution is IFC 2x3. In the second case, Remco needs something from Remco, so that kind of goes well. Remco needs something from Lex. They preferred to have that in IFC 2x3. So the green boxes are a match in the preferred way of working. The yellow boxes are, there's no match in the preferred way of collaboration, but you can still collaborate. And the red boxes is, there's no match, so you really have to sit down and talk about this before you start working, because there's no way of exchanging data between the two. There's also questions in there on what kind of classification system do you want to use, when do you want to get paid, what's your priority on model checking, etc., etc. And the most interesting question is who should be the leading partner. I haven't seen any BIM execution plan that's been generated where everyone agrees on who should be the leading partner. It's very interesting. A slide on the IFC analytics. So when you upload a model, you can actually see what kind of materials are being used, number of objects, what kind of objects are those. So in this case, there's a lot of objects on the covering, so there's a lot of richness in the covering elements. There's a lot of properties on IFC spaces, not as much properties on staircases. So you can really get an insight on where is the detailness in my model, where's the richness, how does that compare to others as well. And then slowly coming back to the topic of certification and actually finding your ideal process. These are a couple of example questions of the BIM QuickScan. So there's actually 45 of them, and this is a result from a company that performed a BIM QuickScan. So this company scores quite low on organization and management, a little bit higher on mentality and culture, very high on information structures and information flow, and also quite high on technology and applications. You see the spider diagram there as well. Use of tools is quite high, use of open standards, but the organization is not so well developed. So when you fill out these questions, you get a result like this, and then you can compare it with others. So in this case, you can compare your own score to all the scores, but also to different disciplines. I want to show you an example of how that could look, because in this case, the bars represent the score of the individual organization that's logged in, and the lines represent different other disciplines. I intentionally didn't put the names in there, but you really see large differences per discipline. Usually what we see is that manufacturers and suppliers have a really low profile on strategy, because for them, BIM strategy is not as important as actually having a sales strategy. But they score really high, they outperform any other discipline on this information structure and information flow, because for them it's really important to interface with a lot of different other people. So their maturity on interfacing with others is really high. And we see the same differences between use of tools. Some disciplines like clients have a very low maturity on use of tools, because for them it's really not important. And architects have a really high score on use of tools, because they want to use different design tools, maybe even generative design tools, to actually help their design process. So this is coming back to my original pitch, that there's no simple solution and a simple workflow. There's no standardized flow of how an organization should deal with BIM. Depending on your organization, depending on your discipline, depending on what you want to do with BIM, you have a different maturity profile and different preferences. And that's what we really see coming back into this BIM QuickScan. Even differences between architects. We have this, in the Netherlands we call them voodoo architects. It's an abbreviation of preliminary design, of the first two preliminary design stages. Because architects only doing this sketching designs, they have a completely different BIM maturity profile than the architects that also do the drawings and actually the model checking with others. So what I'm trying to bring to you is that you really have to think about what is your BIM profile? What is your competitive advantage? What kind of organization are you? Don't take the easy way out to just certify against the standardized way of working, because when everyone works in the same way, you don't have a competitive advantage anymore. And when you look at the example of the standardized way of working that's been theorized 5 years ago and written down and already overtaken by technology, because you don't have to work like that anymore because there's an automated way of working, it kind of changes the field. And that's where you have to find your competitive advantage. So if you want some help, I told you this was a commercial break, right? If you want some help finding your BIM profile, log in on bimsupporters.com, do a BIM QuickScan, and when you want to know more about that, you can even hire a certified consultant to help you with that. So coming back on the processes and the end result, so how you organize and manage your internal processes is really something you have to figure out yourself. You can't take the easy way out saying that you're certified against an ISO standard. To really find your competitive advantage, you have to dive into it. I'm sorry, there's no easy message here. And coming to the lessons learned, per organization or even per project, the real advantage is optimizing towards your end goal, towards your end result. We've got examples of people actually refusing to work in the agreed standardized way because that agreed standardized way is already 2 years old, and they found a new tool now that can do it automatic. And finding that tool that can do it automatic and massively increases your productivity. So your organization has its own way of working, but as we saw in the BIM execution plan generator data, that can perfectly interface with others because you're only exchanging this end result, this data. And as long as you standardize that, so this is really important, standardizing what you actually need, how you're going to exchange it, and what kind of data format, what kind of semantics, that's important. So focus on standardizing that data interface and figure out how you're going to produce that data in the most effective way as possible. And then there's this funny line that a contractor actually told me. He said, what we're trying to do in the construction industry is that we're brought up with standardization. Standardization is good, so when someone can do the same thing over and over again, he's getting more efficient at it. So what we're trying to do in our industry is we're trying to train these monkeys to do the same thing over and over again, hoping that they can do it 0.5% or a percentage more efficient. Forgetting that there's already an automatic tool out there that will do it in 2 seconds and costs only 10% of this person that you're trying to make it more productive. So this is really something when you want to find your competitive advantage. There's so much data out there right now, there's so much technology, there's so much automation. This is where you can really have your benefits. Finishing up with the last slide, prepare yourself and your organization. So this is wrapping up what I said earlier. We're used to doing the same thing over and over again to make it more efficient, but these standards, processes, and tools don't cut it anymore in an industry that's increasingly complex and changing. We need to learn to work in a more effective way instead of trying to be more efficient, because the tools and technology to automate a lot of our tasks are already out there. I wish you the best of luck finding your competitive advantage. Thank you very much.